Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Podcast. My name is Craig Fowler, and helping me on this occasion to look back through the 8 matches which took place in the Premier Sports Cup last 16, it is Craig Anderson. Craig, thanks for coming on with me today. How have you been doing? How was your weekend?
My weekend was really good. I didn't let the football spoil it on Sunday. I was out on family on Saturday and Sunday. Nice kind of walks around the local area. Did the shopping. That was about it. And yeah, the football I can choose to forget. So yeah, all in all, a good one. What about yourself?
Yeah, kind of much the same. I think was Friday. Yeah, Friday was just a chill one in the house because we were going out on Saturday with my girlfriend down to our families. It was a kind of family party, only been once before, so it was good to kind of meet everybody, get to know everybody a bit more for the second time. And yes, very much a good time had despite the football, because obviously both our teams lost. And I was going to say lost 1-0. No. In fact, no, despite playing a team in the division below, my team did not lose 1-0, it lost 2-0. But we'll get to those soon enough. But what we're going to do is we usually do at this time of year with the League Cup last 16, because there is 8 games to cover. We don't go through every single match, but we'll mention something about every match as we do it in more of a winners and losers type bracket. So I think it's only, I was going to just ask you for a winner or a loser, Craig, first of all, but suppose we should actually start off by talking about the 2 games that are the biggest shocks and kind of pick winners and losers for them. So I could actually throw at the first one. A clear winner, Dougie Samuel / Spartans Football Club, beating Ross County 1-0 thanks to a Blair Henderson header. We could also have Blair Henderson as a potential winner for this game, and getting their first ever victory over Premiership opposition. It's again another case of a Tier 4 club beating a Tier 1 club, so that immediately puts it amongst the ranks of Scottish football's biggest shocks. And yeah, what a result for Spartans, Craig.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky enough. I lived in Edinburgh at the time that Spartans went on their Scottish Cup run a few years ago when they were still an East of Scotland League team, and they knocked out Clyde and Morton in consecutive rounds, and then they gave it a good go in the I want to say the last 16. It was Berwick Rangers that they eventually actually beat them in the last 16. I think it was 2015, so they might have been in the Lowland League actually, but it was around about that time. And you get the sense when you go to Spartans for a cup tie. I was lucky enough to go there for a League Cup game with Kelly, where it was 0-0 at half time as well. And this was Steve Clark's Kelly that would go on to finish third. When it's a cup tie there, teams do not like to go to Ainsley Park one bit to play Spartans. And unlike a lot of the times with these games where it's like smash and grab, based on the highlights at least, which is all we had to go on, it wasn't a game I picked to watch. It looked like Spartans matched Ross County. So, again, a good League 2 team, but a League 2 team nonetheless, actually kind of going toe-to-toe with much higher ranked opposition. Again, yeah, there's a bit of money being spent on Spartans. It's not like they've got a bunch of nobodies assembled there. They do have kind of experience through the team. You mentioned Henderson as a League 2 player. It's not like some Gretna situation where they've got, Championship level forwards coming in, but Henderson, it's funny when you hear the Sean and Craig talk about them on Lower League podcasts, or indeed anyone else you get on talking on Lower League podcasts about Blair Henderson. It's very much always like, he's not really that good. And then you look at his goal scoring record and you're like, he does seem to score like 20 plus goals every season and has done for quite a while. So it's interesting that obviously the type of player he is, he maybe isn't the most aesthetically pleasing, and the header he actually scores in this game is a weird one, I would say. I can't tell if it's a brilliant header or a bit lucky, or maybe both.
Yeah, certainly. But talk about aesthetically pleasing. Certainly, aesthetically pleasing header is it? It's one of those ones that has that kind of proper loop on it and ends up, pretty much in the corner of the net. Henderson did get. I saw that in the newspaper report for this one. He was man of the match for not only his goal but also just his general leading of the line and link-up play, and I think that's kind of what you say about him. And it is pertinent what you say, because that's what Telford and Sean said on the podcast last Thursday when they were discussing Henderson, is that he is a League 2 player in the sense that I don't think he's ever played at a higher level than League 2, or at least not maybe in a good few years. He's always been So he was good at Annan in League Two, good at Edinburgh in League Two, and now good with Spartans in League Two.
I think he had a couple of like loan spells, but I don't know what club he was at, or was he a Dunfermline youth player? And I think he maybe like had like 1 or 2 games in the Championship with them and like a loan at East Fife. But that was like way back when he was like a teenager. And as you say, since then, entirely in the 4th and 5th tier.
And I think the knock on him has been that he only does score goals. So if he's not scoring goals, he's not contributing a lot. And that was certainly the case when he was at Edinburgh, and he was like the talisman the first season after he joined. But then he stopped scoring as much, and then when he stopped scoring, it was like, well, what are you going to have him in the team for? But in this one, for what I've read, it seemed like he was doing an awful lot more, because he's certainly got the body frame to lead the line quite well. It's just about whether he's got the touch and the mobility to also do it as well. But he certainly managed to do it against County in this game. But to further on your point about Spartans deserving it, their own man of the match, I always like, it's the Malton Hops. It's a pub that I've frequented league sometimes, and they obviously sponsor the club in some ways. So it's always the Malton Hops man of the match, and that was to Jamie Dishington, who's a winger himself. So they've got two of their forward players being the better players on the side. And then you could also see as well, Ross Laidlaw was, from the highlights, you could see was easily one of County's better players. It was certainly one of the few County players I could see where the fans weren't pointing the finger of blame after this one. But we should probably, before we move on to the next game, County, I mean, they were undefeated to begin this campaign. So you don't want to be too down on them, but it just kind of goes with what we've looked at County since the summer and not really thought that they would progress much beyond what they did last season, which was 11th place, and that the squad doesn't look that good. And last week, they played that narrow formation against Dundee United, where certainly the better team in the first half in Dingwall should have been a goal up, didn't manage to do it. United scored, and then County eventually managed to fight their way back into the match and get a late equaliser. But they went with the same lineup, and I mean, you can understand the thinking, right? If you go with like a narrow 4-4-2 with a very narrow midfield that doesn't have any natural wingers in it, you do that against United at home because you're looking to nullify what they can do and throw them off their game. When you're playing a team for League Two, you surely want to set up in a more expansive way so you could use, it's not going to be the biggest pitch at Ainsley Park, but use as much of the width as possible, get that lower league team running about, get them pulled each where and there, test their organisation because they can only work on it, a couple of days a week. And yet they're going with the same kind of narrow system and just playing very ponderously, very slowly on the ball, not doing what you should be doing to kind of boost your own advantages in a matchup like this. And that's basically what led to the defeat.
Yeah, and it was one of those that when I saw the goal coming in, I was like, having seen Ross County so far, and I know they did pull back a late goal, you're like, I don't suspect they're got it in them to like bombard a team and the way that they chase a goal. I thought once it went 1-0, I'm like, they're probably going to lose here. Whereas with a lot of teams, you wouldn't think that. So yeah, I think it's probably been coming a little bit for them for a wee while. Like just they've not really got that many good players, so it's always like you're going to get brought down to the level of your opponent in some way. But a lot of what they're good at is kind of all about teamwork and all that, and when that fails, your team fails.
Right, let's move on. So let's, like I said at the start, we'll start with the two big shocks, and the second one was another match on Saturday. Falkirk 2, Hearts 0, second half goals from Ethan Ross and Dylan Tate. Craig, have you got a winner or loser from this match you can throw out? Because I can suggest plenty.
It's hard. Like we'll look and we'll focus on the winners, and the winner has to be. It could be a number of people from associated with Falkirk, but I'll say John McGlynn for obvious reasons that he's coming back to a club which he obviously had a long association with, and a club that discarded him as manager. I'm not saying it was incorrect to do so, because he certainly wasn't a good Hearts manager, but in very tough circumstances. But he has got something going at Falkirk at the moment, and you saw it last season. You kind of, because there was a bit of chat at the start of last season when they obviously failed quite badly the season before his first season in charge, that people questioning whether he should continue, especially after the kind of Airdrie game in the playoffs. But you kind of also looked at John McGlynn's record. He did it with Wraith Rovers. It was always seemed to be the second time around he would get it right, and right enough, obviously their season from a league perspective, literally could not have been better last season, and they've continued on that form. They did obviously lose one of their group stage games, but nonetheless have, apart from that, 5 wins out of 6. And I think they rode the luck early on in this game, but the second half, I think it was a lot of what we saw from Falkirk, and if anything, it could have been more, because while, and you might pick him as a loser, but while Craig Gordon obviously is massively at fault for the second goal, and at 41 years of age, we know, Craig, that you can't pass the ball, don't pretend. He did make 2 or 3 really important saves. The one in, it was in the first half when McKeever goes through and goal. It's a brilliant save, and at the time that could have been pivotal in the game had Hearts turned up in the second half. But I think McGlynn's the one who sets up his team. He set up that Falkirk team. They've got good players, don't get me wrong, but it's like a bunch of guys who you've been looking through for years as being like float about League One Championship players. It's not like there's loads of absolute star quality in that team. There's good players, and I think Keelan Adams at right back, every time I've seen wee bits of him, looks a player, but they're not like packed with star names the way I think the Falkirk team that they got to the playoffs several times, or at least they kind of famously in 2016 did. So
I was thinking that as the Will Vaulks team.
Yes, yeah. Well, you look at where a lot of that squad ended up playing in the Championship, Premier League, all the rest of it. One of them chucking them a goal on Saturday as well, but. In fact, sorry, Kingsley wasn't in that team.
No,
he was gone by then.
That was the team before that. That was he was more the kind of that really, was he that really young side that came up with the Fultons and
I think when they got to the Scottish Cup semi, I think he was part of that one. But yes, sorry, but he did chuck the goal. That was very poor defending from him in the second goal also.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Gordon in terms of would I have him as a loser. I actually wouldn't, because even though he was at fault for that second goal, I didn't see Hearts scoring again by that point anyway, and with the saves that he made, I mean, it was either him or Malatai Boateng for the best Hearts player on the park. Like, it was just a feeble performance. But just another couple of guys to mention, because you mentioned Keelan Adams. He was signed earlier this year from Cumberland Colts, and they immediately sent him back on loan. So you didn't think coming into this campaign that he would be demanding a start. And Finn Yates, who was moved into right back last season, having, I believe he was a centre defender originally, but did a good job there. Or maybe a centre midfielder, I can't remember which. But did a good job on the right, and you kind of assumed he was going to have it. But Adams is coming and giving them an extra dimension, because he's more of an attacking threat going forward. And not only him, but on the other side, and this was kind of my winner for this game, is previously unfancied Falkirk fullbacks. A good bit of alliteration going there as well, because Sean Mackey, there was a point when Falkirk lost to Dunfermline in that campaign where fans were like, right, okay, his time's done. Don't want to see him anymore. He's not got it. Last year, he was the backup for a lot of the campaign to Liam McCann, but he ended the season very well. He had a terrific game in that match against Montrose when they ran up the score just after they'd learned that they'd already won the title. And there was another couple of games towards the conclusion where he really could have helped them make sure they got that unbeaten league season. And he's coming to the season and he's just picked off where that form left off. He did have a little bit of struggles in the opening 20 minutes of this game. Same with a lot of the Falkirk players, because Hearts were very much on top, missed a number of chances. But I'm not even going to sit here and pretend that Hearts were unlucky. Yes, they should have scored some of those. Vargas, Oda in particular, I would say, had great chances to open the scoring. But you should continue that. You shouldn't allow to happen what happened to Hearts, which is that after the 40th minute, the only team that created chances after was Falkirk. And especially when you go behind, like less than 10 minutes in the second half, that is far from good enough. You need to be, if you lose this game, you need to be like the entire match is like those opening 20 odd minutes where you're getting the chances, you're just not finding that composure in front of goal, and ultimately you're unlucky. There was nothing unlucky about Hearts losing this game from that point forward. They were just very poor, and that second period was quite worrying. Well, I don't know how, because I'm not particularly worried, I must say. It was worrying in a sense that we put in that kind of performance, but I don't know. I do wonder whether coming into this campaign, the players in Naismith have bought into their own hype a little bit and they're just not going into. So they obviously did it against Rangers, but in the last 2 games against opposition that were fancied to beat, not going into them with the necessary intensity. And yeah, they did start this one well, but then it was kind of the players coming in who started well when there was more of the guys who usually play, like your Shanklins, your George Grants, when they were coming off the bench. Barry Mackay, fucking hell. Like, these guys were just, as Joel put it, they were walking around as if they were kind of carrying injuries when they're not.
I think talking to the bigger point you're making there, probably one of the other winners is laundrettes in the Gorgie region, because I've seen some incredible sort of both pants shitting and knicker wetting, if you want to use both of those terms, from Hearts fans off the back of this. They're in the same boat a little bit as Kelly are, and we'll get on to Kelly. You have got 2 massive games coming up, and these Europa League games are even bigger than previously now because the format is different. So you're getting an extra 2 games in Europe if you're in the Europa League versus the Conference League group. We've said before, I don't actually think the difference in standards that massive between them. I don't actually think Hearts have got much less chance of getting through the Europa League phase than they do the Conference League as well. So I think there's a lot of incentive there. And the team Hearts put out should be by miles good enough to beat. It might be a changed team, and I saw a lot of people criticising them for not putting out their strongest team. I think that was a weird decision against Dundee to be a bit rotated, but in this game it made perfect sense to me. That team's more than good enough. One thing I'll say is I think the team's one defensive midfielder short. I think you can see that like you're going with like Spittle and Danda as your kind of other 2 alongside Boateng. I know Boateng's good and physical and all the rest of it. He needs support there to do that, but you need to be patient at this point in a season.
And if we're talking specifically about that position, the 2 defensive midfielders that would easily start beside Boateng would be Benny Beringame and Callum Nieuwenhof, who are both injured.
Yeah,
I don't think he's injured a lot, but you know what I mean.
Devlin's on the bench though, and I think we'd offered a bit more. But yeah, I mean, I get it, and that's the point. Hearts' priority, as much as the League Cup, and I'm the points that I'm making here will be equally true for Kelly. Your priority, you obviously can win the League Cup. They would have been 2 of the favourites outside of Rangers and Celtic to do so this season. But you can have the best team you can have and still not get near the League Cup. And you can win this game, you can win another game, and then you get the semi-final and you get drawn against Rangers or Celtic and you probably lose anyway. While the cup was opened up, you do have to prioritise firstly. I don't think it's a problem to be rotating your squad. Hearts have got a deep enough and a good enough squad that the team that they put out is more than good enough to beat Falkirk. So I don't think the rotation is the issue. The issue has been, as you said, sloppiness in the performance, and then that lack of intensity. And is that also just because the players have got one eye on that other game? I suspect it is. I would still back that Hearts are a good team, but I can understand why people would waver on that. But it's a very long season. Hearts have played 3 games this season, so I think there's probably a bit of time. I would say you do now expect and want and hope for a big performance in the Czech Republic on Thursday, though, because if you always think if you rest players for a game and then you still fuck that game up, that's when the problems start coming. But I do think they'll turn up in that one, to be honest.
Okay, I need cheered up after that, so I'm going to throw us out a winner and a loser from the weekend. I'm going to go loser, and I'm going to go... Actually, I was going to say David Gray. I could go winner, and I could say the rest of us, because it looks like we might have a comedy Hibs goalkeeper again. Because Hibs have got that reputation, and that reputation comes from quite a long time ago now, you'd have to say. Like, it was Nick Colgan was kind of not too bad. He had these moments, but he was generally decent enough. But then after them, you had Simon Brown, terrible. Zibby Malkowski, terrible. Yves Makalambi had these moments but made a number of mistakes. A few other keepers I'm probably forgetting around about that period. Graham Stack, not very good. Graham Smith, dreadful, it's particularly in that 6-all game. And it was just a point where Hibs had bad goalie after bad goalie after bad goalie, and that has stuck with them ever since. But if you actually look at Hibs, ever since like Ben Williams in the early noughties, pretty much like the vast majority of Hibs goalies have actually been either okay or, in like the case of somebody like Ofer Marciano, very good. So they've not had, especially like derby matches, they've not had anybody like really throwing them in the back of the net. But with Josef Bursic looking like he has done so far this season, they might be back. They might be back. And bloody hell, what a mistake that was for the third goal. Because yes, it's a poor pass given to him. It's like, and that was why I was going to use David Gray as an example of a loser for the weekend, just because of the manner in which Hibs are kind of setting up their team right now would have me a little bit worried as a Hibs fan. But in this, we'll get to that in a second. On this incident in particular, yeah, it's a poor pass back to him, but he should, like, he turns his head quickly enough that must surely see Nicholas Kuhn running right at him, and he still tries to pass the ball through him anyway. It's unbelievable.
To me, it's the problem is that every time a cross came into the box, especially in the first half when Celtic were bombarding him, he looked like he was so panicky and flappy and he was coming out and punching and stuff. I'm like, where was that level of panic when you needed it? Where was that level of panic when Marvin Ekipeta serves you up a terrible back pass? Don't get me wrong, he's badly at fault for the second and third goals as well. But he serves you up a terrible back pass. Just put your foot through it. You do not need composure at that moment. You need composure when you're coming to try and catch a cross or there's a shot in on top of you. You don't need to be flapping that up in the air. But when that is coming, deal with that. But I was actually I think that kind of thing can happen to most goalkeepers. And while it's quite comical, I actually think the second goal shows him up as worse, because the second goal, my issue with him, again, you can say the centre halves are a problem there as well. My biggest issue with that is the angle that he comes out at the goal is not right.
Yeah.
He's in line with the left-hand goalpost. So when he comes out, because even accounting for all the nonsense that goes on with that goal, if he has got his angles right, the shot from Maida is trickling. It trickles right into the middle of the goal. It's just that he's not there.
Yeah, the only thing I can think is that he thought the angle that he took suggested to me that he believed he was going to get to the ball first. But that's not really much better. That's just failing to properly recognise another aspect of your game as opposed to getting your angles properly right. He's not managed to judge the flight of the ball. So that's equally as poor. But that was what I thought. That was why I thought he chose that angle.
But what's going on with Hibs that they think that a guy who, as far as I can see, has 6 games in the Belgian second tier for Club Brugge's B team in the last 2 years, unless I'm missing something, can come in and be your first choice goalkeeper? It doesn't make a lick of sense to me. Maybe he is going to be some superstar keeper, but most likely he's not. The most likely outcome is indeed that what we are seeing is just not a very good goalkeeper. Or at least not a very good goalkeeper at the moment, we'll put it that way. And then the other guy they've brought in is also barely played any football for years, and Smith, who's on the bench. I think, unless I'm missing anything, his last league appearance was in March 2021 for Nottingham Forest in the Championship. And that's a long time.
It is a particularly troublesome problem for Hibs as well, because they could really do with a solid goalkeeper between the sticks, because their defence overall is looking very flimsy at this point in time. They're now making moves in the transfer market where they're improving things up front. Bowie is obviously not had much football so far. He's just kind of came back in, but he's shown flashes already that he's going to be a good signing. They're trying very desperately to bring Luke McCowan. That would be a good sign if they managed to bring him in. And Mikola Kukurevich, when he was at Hibs the last time, when he was fit, he was a very good player for them. And he's gotten a bit older. You'd imagine he's gotten a bit better. Again, it's a big if, but if he can stay fit across most of the season, Hibs will be okay going forward. He's a brilliant goal. A brilliant header. And he's a good target man. He's very, very kind of that European tall target man where he's big, but he's also got like good technique. Can take the ball in, can link play, can do all that stuff. But at the back, Ekpiteta is looking like a bomb scare, especially with the ball at his feet, and they're asking him to play these balls out from the back that it doesn't look like he's got the capability to do, so it's even kind of compounded his weaknesses. Jordan Abita has been in dreadful form to begin the season, and there's no competition for him at this moment in time because Louis Stevenson's away. And, I mean, Lewis Miller is starting every single game at right back. Miller has his uses as a Scottish Premiership squad player, I would say. If you're a team with ambitions, and every season Hibs should have ambitions to finish in the top 3 or 4 places, Lewis Miller is not good enough to play every single game for you at that position. So there's just a number of question marks. And even in going into midfield, Mariah Welsh was good when he first came in because Hibs were really missing that player who would do so much work and free up guys like Newell to play a bit. But you can see, especially in matches like this, when they're going up against tougher opposition, that he just doesn't have the quality. So there's like from the base of their midfield going backwards, there's just so many question marks about Hibs, and so much of it looks like it's basically, you kind of wondered if Gray was going to come in and play the style of direct football, knows what it takes to win in the Scottish Premiership. I know it's not all just him, it's also to do with the recruitment, and Malky Mackay, I'm sure, has a big part in this as well. But they seem to be just be building a classical Hibs team that's going to be good going forward, decent to watch at points, but defensively they're going to be an absolute mess and finish 6th or 7th.
Well, the good football person, Malky Mackay, which is how Michael Stewart decided to editorialise and describe him as somehow on the Premier Sports broadcast for some reason. On Lewis Miller, the one thing I will say from him is that is a good long throw he is developing. That was coming into the box from miles away, so that's something to keep an eye on. And from a Celtic point of view, I would say there was a spell where just before they fucked up and conceded that third goal, where Hibs had Celtic a bit rattled. As much as Celtic continued, they've obviously won all their games this season. They have been imperious. They've scored a lot of goals. I thought they were got at briefly in that period where Hibs were physical and aggressive with them, particularly closing them down a lot, not giving them time, being in their face. And I felt they looked quite soft because they were constantly just looking for fouls in midfield, which you're not necessarily always going to get all of them. Some of them is and especially going into Europe, like that's not going to wash in Europe. Like if your midfield is powder puff, you're going to get found out for that. They were very impressive in attacking it. They brought on Ida for his second debut, and he was, I thought, quite poor. He linked up a little bit, but he was not that involved. There are still little bits of Celtic's performance that would make you worry a wee bit, but at the same time, I think it is pretty clear we are much closer to the type of team that we expected to see from Rodgers when he came in last year. So there's positives and negatives from them.
Yeah, I had something on that as well, and just basically this is the only way to play Celtic this season. Last campaign, you could really get away with standing off them because they just didn't have that kind of verve. It was just missing for most of the campaign. Just too ponderous with the ball, not being decisive enough, not moving it quickly enough. That's gone this season. They're playing with that verve again, and therefore, if you sit off them, they're just going to carve you apart. So you need to get in their face, and you need to take advantage of the fact that, as you say, very good team, undeniably, but not the most physical of sides. And that is, and people were saying, I think somebody in the chat was wondering whether Celtic are going to go through another undefeated season under Rodgers. I can't see that. I think when weather gets crap, fixtures come thick and fast, and pitches get bogged down, there's going to be somebody that's going to it's going to be someday. One team is going to manage.
Well, it's one game. That's what you're saying.
Get 3 points for them. Right, Craig, give me a winner or a loser from another game.
I will go for Dundee Football Club, and I mean it's hard to pick one specific player, but I'll be boring and go for Tony Docherty. I could have gone for Scott Tiffany. I could go for Seb Palmer Holden, who, despite kind of constantly being criticised in this podcast, is scoring quite a few goals.
Yeah.
But I think what we are seeing at Dundee is not something I expected from them. I expected them to be pretty good this season again. I thought they were good last season, obviously, and I expected them to continue that. But they've suddenly, and again, I appreciate they have been mostly playing against lower league opposition. And then they obviously they're one exception to that. The only league game they've won so far was against Hearts, but they have been banging in goals at a prodigious rate. 29 goals they've scored already this season. I was checking earlier, and there were some entire seasons in the sort of turn of the century, sort of Victorian times. They didn't score that in an entire season. Obviously, a much shorter campaign at that point, but so they have been. It's the third time already in 7 games that they have scored 6 or more goals. That's some going, and 6 different goal scorers in this game as well. So a lot to really like about the way Dundee are playing. A lot of verve to their attacking play. We weren't sure on Larkesh based on his debut, but he, again, caveated with the quality of the opposition. Looks really comfortable on the ball, looks very smooth in possession, looks like he's kind of wanting to come in field a lot as well. You have a really diverse midfield, I would say, in terms of the type of players that you've got in it. Now, again, you mentioned McCowan earlier, probably not going to be at Dundee, I would guess, by the end of August, but while you've got that midfield with him, Silla and Cameron, like they're all quite different types of players. Like McCowan's the more gifted technician, and I'm not saying that Cameron isn't necessarily, he can play, but he's more about energy. But then you've got Silla, who kind of dominates in the middle of the park as well, but is again can play. So you've got quite a nice balance there. Simon Murray hasn't been scoring goals, didn't score in this game, but he's a kind of nuisance as well. And they look pretty solid. I'll question their defence. I wonder whether, because they have still been conceding goals in most games, that might prove to be a problem. But like in this game, they were superb to watch, and they were, I suppose, helped a little bit by Kieran Wright's performance in goals for Airdrie, which was at least 3 of the goals were, to me, he was directly at fault for. So they were helped, but I think Dundee I expected them to do fairly well, but not in the fashion that they have done.
Yeah, and Curtis Bain's goal was just quite something as well. Like, Gary called it a Rabona in the chat. That's not a Rabona, but it's certainly not a goal I imagine Curtis Bain scoring, put it that way.
It was, yeah, it's like, I have to say, like the angle, it was like they showed you a replay on the highlights, and the replay was basically just the same angle again that you'd already seen. So I was like, the editing of that left a lot to be desired in general. That there was it in this game that there was a disallowed goal for offside where they zoomed in on like a totally different part of the pitch that meant that you couldn't see it. I think it was in this game.
Yeah, it was. There was also the editing for the Hearts game as well. It didn't have Oda's chance, which I thought was quite strange. That was a big chance.
But it was one of the ones where it was Rob who was on the co-coms. You could hear, I think it may have been this chance where you hear on the co-com saying, and that's another brilliant save from Hogarth. As Falkirk break up the other end of the park, like sling the ball into the box, nothing happens. It comes to the edge of the box, and there's like a trickled shot.
Yeah,
and that's shown. But the one that Rob was exaggerating, who knows? But Rob described as a brilliant save did not appear in the highlights. So I appreciate they're being hacked together, but I think there's a lot to be said for production value at the moment, and lots of content being put out. A lot of laziness to me going on, and maybe it's time constraints and stuff, but stuff like not neatly knitting together the way that the words come in these highlights packages. So like, don't join a highlights pack. Fine if you are a part-time team in League 2 chucking together your highlights package and you're just cutting it straight out of your live stream.
Your live stream, your commentary, yeah.
Premier Sports, you're a supposedly big organisation. You're putting these on your YouTube. I mean, at least we've got the highlights, which you never used to get, in the streaming and all that, which to a point is good. But don't use, and this was particularly true on the Dundee United, sorry, just coming into a rant here, on the Dundee United one on the other day, clearly a club commentary, but which is fine. Rob and Laurie did the Falkirk Hearts game, but they were, I would say, impartial. I mean, because that's their job. The guy who like basically cheering every time Dundee United nearly scored on theirs, but then you've also got this aspect where if you join a piece of play and they're mid-sentence, mute the audio so that it only comes in after that sentence is finished. Just these little things really annoy me, because it's like, this is not amateur hour stuff. This is a broadcaster that people are paying good money to watch. Like, just be professional about it. But anyway, coming back to what game I was talking about, Dundee game. You were going to mention Dundee. Sorry.
No, well, I said about Curtis Bain's goal, and I think you could have covered it already. I'd written in my notes, like, Scott Tiffany really could have turned his Dundee career around since around about, February, March time last year, when he eventually started to kind of put some games together. And certainly helped out by the fact that Tory Docherty in this campaign has moved his team around a bit more. You just kind of assumed he was going to go with a 3 at the back, but that's now the second week in a row they've gone with a 4-3-3, and that's going to be good for somebody like Tiffany, he's a winger. Like that's undoubtedly his best position, and we're in a side that's playing with a 3-5-2 that's always going to be trickier to make as much of an impact. Before we move on, though, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Airdrie. So Airdrie were quite impressive at the beginning of the second half, and they were 2-0 down by this point, but they put Dundee under a bit of pressure, played some nice football, had some opportunities in and around the penalty box, didn't get the goal. Then Dylan McDonald was sent off for that last man tackle. That was it. Was that 2-0 or 3-0 actually? Regardless, they didn't score when they could have had the chance. Dundee made it 3, and then the red card meant the game was gone for them. But it highlighted, and obviously it's like tough opposition, and they're beaten heavily, and the red card was also kind of down to that as well. And they've also shown against Aberdeen in the Premier Sports Cup that they've performed well against Premiership opposition already. They've not been too bad in the league, but their squad is a little bit unbalanced. Like, they've made a number of signings because a number of players left, so they had to. But there's been quite a lot of kind of decent technical midfielders, but like they've barely got any wide players. Without Lewis McGregor in this one, I didn't really have any pace. And they're also lacking a bit up front, because last campaign they had Gabby McGill and Nikolai Todorov, both of whom could be relied upon to play with their back to goal and to help get the team up the park. And it playing with one of them two really kind of helped Airdrie's away form as the campaign went on a bit, because it gave them that ability to switch things up. And when you're under the cosh away, you've got that out ball. They've now brought in Ben Wilson from Cliftonville, I think, in Northern Ireland, and he's got some ability about him, but from the early side so far this season, he can't hold up the ball. So I think Airdrie are going to be good enough this campaign that they might not necessarily have to worry about relegation, but it does seem like in a season where the championship is wide open, they've put together a squad that's missing the kind of some key components for them to go and really kind of challenge to try and win it or to get promotion through the playoffs.
I think they did have a couple of changes, because I mentioned, right, he's not their normal first choice keeper. Like
it's centre half. They had 3 centre halves injured as well.
Yeah, and so there are kind of mitigating circumstances. I think they are a team that when they lose, they sometimes lose badly, and I think that's what we saw. But they're always a good team to watch. I know Gary was saying he was quite impressed by a lot of their play once they were getting gubbed. But yeah, I think there's enough to like, but the question marks are always the same.
Right, so where should we go next? Is it my turn to throw somebody out? Okay, I'll throw out a loser for our next game, and I'm going to go for Shayden Morris. So this is from Aberdeen's 1-0 win over Queen's Park, and it's not that Shayden Morris was necessarily that poor. It's more about the fact that he began the season with, like many players in that Aberdeen team, and I suppose you can throw in Vicente Busayan into a loser here as well, because the slate has been wiped clean. They've been allowed to come into the side and play. Busayan got a goal last week. Morris has been certainly a lot better than he's looked at any other point in his Aberdeen career to date. But now they've spent £800,000 on Topi Keskinen, who got the only goal of the game in this one. And it was just that piece of quality that, I mean, Morris in particular, we've seen it so far this campaign. He's been a better player. He's done a lot of running. He's been an important part to Aberdeen's start to the season by having that kind of those different attributes. You've got him kind of stretch teams and to run at teams on one side, Jamie McGrath on the other. But you can still see that he's lacking a bit of quality in the final third, lacking a bit in his decision making. And you would at least think, if you're spending £800,000 on a Finnish winger in Keskinen, that he's going to have that quality, which means that Morris is going to get stuffed back down on like the bench, and if he's lucky, kind of coming on into games and trying to make an impact that way rather than starting. Because Keskinen showed with that turn and finish that he certainly looks like he's got the quality that we don't perceive Morris to have.
Morrison's a very basic footballer. I think that's quite clear. It's not that he doesn't offer anything, but he's not got anything that's going to surprise you at any point. Keskinen, I would say I raise my eyebrow at the amount of money being spent on a player from like Finnish football, because it's
who's not an international.
yeah, and he's playing like he's played youth levels for Finland, but the Finnish league's quite a hard one to get. I mean, obviously, like Morelos came from there. He had a very good season there and did well in Scotland. But lots of players come from Finland or go to like Lee Irwin scores a lot of goals in Finland, for example. Lee Irwin's fine. Lee Irwin would probably still be doing fine in our Premiership if he was playing here. But you don't really know the level. But they have. It's been a mixed bag with their scouting, but I think you have to trust that they probably have seen at least something, and that is a brilliant start from them. And for me, for Aberdeen, like you can't argue with their start to the season. Clearly, 7 wins in a row is superb. Yes, again, like the caveat with Dundee, they've not necessarily really played anyone yet. Their biggest opponent was St Mirren, who fair enough they beat comfortably. But again, that was sandwiched between 2 European games for St Mirren. But nonetheless, like you have to win all the different ways. They've won convincingly in quite a few of those League Cup games, but this time they get the win. They deserve to win. I think they deserve to win. Queen's Park were in the game and had chances of their own, but Aberdeen did have a lot of it. It did feel like one of those matter of time games rather than Aberdeen running out of ideas. They were kind of constantly dangerous throughout the game, and yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of solidity, and I think it is interesting though that Keskinen aside, the guys who kept showing up big for them have been the guys who were already there. I think McGrath's been good this season.
Mm-hmm.
Shinnie has looked a lot more himself with having Nielsen, who seems to be a good addition alongside him, and you're starting to see bits from like Nicky Devlin as well that maybe he still has something to offer. Like I say that I think he did fine last season, but like you think when a new manager comes in, right, he's not going to survive that cull, but he's still in the team. So lots of positives, I think, mainly for Aberdeen. And ultimately, yeah, you can probably grumble about the fact they didn't score that many goals or didn't win more comfortably. But you're in the quarterfinals. They have got a home tie against Spartans, continuing their very, very generous recent run of draws that they've had. But fair play, like, you would imagine, as much as we talked up Spartans, going to Pittodrie is quite a different story to bringing Ross County to your place. So Aberdeen probably looking at yet another semi-final.
Yeah.
You cannot argue with that start for a new manager, and so there's a lot of positivity to kind of start the season with. Right,
is it your turn now to throw something out?
Yeah, so I'll go for a winner from this game, and I will go for Tawanda Maswanise, the new Motherwell signing, the Zimbabwean. The only slight disappointment, I saw, obviously, we hadn't heard of this guy yesterday morning, and then Graham shared something on a chat that was like from a Zimbabwean football blog or something, saying that he was close to joining Scottish Giants Motherwell, which is the exact quote, which obviously Graham got quite excited about. And I hadn't read. I was out all morning. I was saying to you, I didn't actually realise this game was a 2 p.m. kickoff and not a 3 p.m. kickoff until about 1:45, which was quite a disappointment to me. But nonetheless, not because I was trying to go to the game, I should add, just because I was hoping to get back to see all of it rather than what I did see. And so I had kind of assumed that this guy had maybe been brought in from African football, that he'd maybe been signed from a Zimbabwean club rather than being at Leicester, which is much less fun. But nonetheless, I thought he was a live wire when he came on in this game. He was it was a pretty poor game. Kelly made 9 changes, obviously with more than one eye on Copenhagen, but it's still a strong Kelly. Like, you can look at the Kelly team and see it's clearly not our strongest team, but you also look at it and it's not a bad team by any stretch, just like we spoke about with Hearts. But this guy was a guy that kind of came on, albeit when Kelly were down to 10 men, but he was a live wire, and along with ABA obviously comes on and scores the goals, were the kind of game-changing subs from Kettlewell. And it's hard to judge the game. Like, not a lot had happened. Motherwell were probably the better team even before the red card, but I kind of felt like if Kelly could just get to the hour mark, it felt like McInnes was then going to throw on the subs, and if we were at 0-0 at that point, I thought we were probably going to go on and win. But instead, obviously the red card comes in, and it's very much a backs to the wall kind of situation for Kelly, who ended up making 7 subs in this game because there was a quintuple substitution, which McKinney said was always planned on the hour mark. Then Fraser Murray got a head knock. I think to me it sounded like he bleeding from the head rather than like a concussion, but obviously not taking any chances on that. So there was then a concussion sub used, and then there was also the extra sub for extra time. So all changed through that Kelly squad, and it was a kind of defensive effort. And I was kind of hoping, because we did have half chances, and I was hoping we would cling on maybe and get to penalties, even though our record in those is atrocious. But it was a nice goal, and I think Motherwell did deserve to win the game. Ultimately, having said that, like, and their defence looks really strong. We didn't see a lot of Oxborough. We haven't necessarily. Andy Halliday is not having a good start to the campaign for Motherwell at all.
Well, that was actually my kind of only winner and loser thing to add to this game was winner being Lennon Miller, because just going off of what you're saying, like a BA coming on, scoring, making an impact, the new signing coming on, making an impact, Tony Watt by accounts of Motherwell fans coming on and putting in a shift for them as well. And I think the hope for any Motherwell fan and for Lennon Miller himself is that this encourages Stuart Kettlewell into actually playing with a proper front three that has three attacking players in it, and stop trying to shoehorn Lennon Miller into this more kind of forward role and just stick him back in the midfield alongside Davor Zarkowski, which is the partnership that finished last season, because that seemed to work fairly fine, and he's kind of got away for that and almost kind of out of necessity, because they're lacking players further forward who are kind of got any quality. So Miller's been put there. And even though I didn't see this game, I did see Miller play there when they played against County. And I just saw a player it didn't look like a good fit. Like, he wanted to, a lot of Miller's game is his passing ability, and so many times he just kind of had to take the ball when he's back to goal. And then, so he was like knocking the ball off rather than trying to play like a through ball and to play the play forward and to progress it forward and to get his team on the front foot. So, for what I saw for that game, it didn't really look like it was working. And if these guys who've come off the bench can, like I say, persuade Kettlewell to start them, that means Miller can go back to his best position. And it's best for Motherwell as well. If they're wanting to try and sell him and make a bit of money off him, then play him where he's at his best. Don't try and shoe him into an attacking position just because he's more technically gifted than the vast majority of your players. I've seen Hearts do that before. I remember Hearts doing that with Larry Kingston, and that certainly didn't work.
It feels very international tournament management rather than anything else. Like, where teams just like get someone into that position just so they can get them on the park. But yeah, just don't. Yeah, don't do it for Andy Halliday's sake, certainly.
I think we've only got 2 games left. Is that right to cover?
Yes.
2, right. Okay, so where are we going next? Right, okay, I've got a question for you, Craig, then. Would you say referee Matthew McDermott in the Rangers 2 St Johnstone 0 match was a winner or loser?
But it's like a bit of, well, you'd have to say a loser on two basic points. Like, first of all, I think the ultimate decision that was reached, and indeed the technical process, like in terms of whether it could be reviewed and the way that worked, was correct. Obviously, if we step back, I think there's 2 very different things you have to think about. So just
say for everybody, this is for the Dessers goal. There was initially it was blown for a foul, but then they looked at VAR and they changed the decision. But there was a bit of controversy around it.
So I feel like I'm going in two-footed on him, but he was not as much of a loser in relation to this goal as Michael Stewart was, because he was talking shit throughout it in terms of how he was describing the goal, and I'll get onto that. But I mean, the only bit he got right, I think, was at the end when he said it wasn't a foul, because to me it wasn't now. But I want to separate 2 separate aspects out, which is whether the referee was right in his actions in terms of how it went before the decision, and then we'll get onto the decision itself. So the laws of the game, and obviously some of you who have been on Patreon will be listening to Ewan and I's podcast series that is coming out on this, that we're talking through them all. And we've not got onto the VR protocols yet. That's kind of the last one we'll do. But when the referees or the officials believe that there is an attacking opportunity, i.e. a player having a run on goal or an opportunity to score, then they should delay their whistle or flag. Like, that's a fundamental part of it. A lot of people get annoyed about this, and again, if you take it to the fundamental point of should VAR exist, which we're both in agreement that it probably shouldn't. But if a VAR system is in place and you want to have these reviews, to me that is required for it to work, because otherwise all it can do is disallow things. It can never give things. Because if you're telling the referee, as soon as you think there's a foul, give the foul, then if the referee gets it wrong, it can't be reviewed and they've cost the team a chance to score a goal. All you're ever doing is disallowing goals because a foul's been given in the build-up. You're never allowing goals where the referee thinks there's been a foul or someone thinks there's been an offside and it turns out there hasn't been. So that's the rule as it stands. So when this incident happens, naked eye watching it live, I thought it was a foul. It looked like a foul by Dessers on Jack Sanders, and he then gets there, and the referee, as again, you've got to bear in mind, referees have, Matthew McDermott have been presumably refereeing for like 15 or 20 years at this point. I don't know how old he is, but you'd assume probably since he was 18 or 19 or whatever. You're conditioned all the way through to when you see a foul, you give a foul. That's like what you do. And sometimes you are going to forget in the heat of the moment, because that's a big game, it's a big decision that he's making. He's going to be like, right, that's a foul, I'm going to give this foul. And then he obviously goes to signal and then goes, oh fuck, I shouldn't be doing this. I need to let the play continue for the reasons we just described. And undoubtedly, he makes a gesture and a signal, which a couple of St Johnstone players saw. But he didn't blow the whistle, he didn't give the foul. So like, in that respect, the referee was wrong to do that, but it was just like an instinctive error. It was just like, if you've ever watched a game, you ever watch officials closely, sometimes they point the wrong way by mistake when they're given a throw-in and then have to correct themselves. Sometimes the assistant puts his flag up and then puts it back down quickly because he realises he's like basically just had a brain fart, just had forgotten something. That's kind of what happened there. He didn't blow his whistle because he realised in time, actually I should let this flow, let this go, see if they score a goal and then give the foul. And at that point, once the goal has been scored, he blows the whistle and gives the free kick that he thought it was. So at that point, no goal has been given, but he has, because he thinks it's a foul, but he's allowed play to continue because VAR exists. And with the exception of him gesturing a little bit, that is the correct thing to do. And in terms of the gesturing, to me, it did distract a couple of St Johnstone players, but the St Johnstone players who it distracted were the ones who were like on the edge of the box and saw him. The ones who were in the vicinity of the goal and could have stopped it, specifically Josh Ray and I think it was Lewis Nielsen, but one of the defenders had no, didn't see the referee. They were potentially like appealing for a foul, as they do, but they were defending.
Yeah.
Even if they hadn't though, even if they had looked at the referee and completely stopped, it actually doesn't matter.
Yeah, the only player I saw that you can maybe say was Dre Wright, who stopped to appeal, looked towards the ref, and then kind of stopped and stayed with his hand up. But I think by the time that he properly stops, because initially he stops to appeal, which he shouldn't do, he should just keep playing and try to get close to the Dessers and try to stop him scoring. But he appeals for the foul, stops, and then by the point he would see the ref, he's still appealing. So I think he himself, because I've seen St Johnstone fans say that they heard a whistle beforehand. You hear the audio, there is no whistle beforehand. And Wright is still kind of appealing. He can maybe get back, but by that point, it's too late for him. By the point that he's looked at McDermott and McDonald signalling, it's too late for them then. When he initially stops to appeal for the foul, that's the point where... So it's not really to do with the fact that McDermott is signalling for it but not blowing, because Wright would have done it anyway.
And I think that's the thing. So you've got this play to the whistle idea, and I think that's... I can understand a little bit of frustration in that people thought the game had stopped. I.e., if Levine's watching that, he's like, you've went to give that foul and you haven't. So I can understand heat of the moment frustration. I just don't understand cold light of day analysis of it, which still suggests like anything other than a muck up by the referee briefly and blowing that. And Stuart was like going on about why is he not if he thought even after the decision was reviewed and the referee and he himself, Stuart, was saying, I don't think that's a foul, so it should be a goal. He's then like, but if the referee thinks it's a foul, he should just have given it. It's like, no, that's the whole fucking point of VAR existing. Again, I don't like it. I don't want it to be there. But if it's there, we have to get ourselves into the position where a decision which is wrong, which affects a potential goal, can be overturned. Otherwise, what's the point? But that kind of takes it through. Like that was that first part of the decision. Just to throw a bit of context, though, even if the players had stopped, as I said, it doesn't matter. I shared this with someone online because it's a really famous example of it. 2006 World Cup, South Korea v Switzerland. Switzerland scored their second goal. This is obviously pre-VAR, pre all of this, where a South Korean player like pokes the ball through towards his own goal. He's like making a tackle, and it goes to a Swiss player, and the assistant puts his flag up for offside against the Swiss attacker. But the referee, who's the Argentinian referee, is watching it and sees what's happened and immediately waves like the flag down and says, no, keep playing. And several of the entire South Korean team stopped, and kind of half including their goalkeeper. Switzerland, I think it gets laid across the goal and someone taps in, and Switzerland scored their second goal. And the goal was allowed to stand because nothing had happened wrong. And yes, the players were distracted by the assistant putting his flag up, but the referee didn't whistle, and it's always just play to the whistle. If the referee whistles and you stop, you're fine. If the referee hasn't whistled, keep playing until he has, and you're never really going to be in any bother. And that referee ended up getting rewarded by refereeing the final because it was obviously made a brave decision, as it would be called. But then coming on to the decision itself, once it's able to be reviewed, I don't think it's a foul. I think Dessers gets himself in front of Sanders, and then I don't think it's a foul either way. So I saw some people saying, if anything, Sanders fouls. I don't think it's a foul. I can understand that someone said there was a bit of a touch with his arm. I personally am quite happy with that decision being overturned. I don't think it was a foul. And again, if VAR is going to be there, that's the whole point of it, that it shouldn't be a foul. But I can understand it looks very messy the way it was done. So I can understand, as I said, St Johnstone fans who are in the stadium or watching the game at the time, or even Craig Levein in his interview being a bit annoyed. But sitting here on a Monday, I don't think anyone really should be at this point.
From the game itself, Dessers obviously scored. It was Danilo that got the start. Doesn't look fit or isn't fit, or doesn't look like he's particularly arsed. It's either one of the two, but it's a bit of an issue when obviously he missed up so much of last season and was like a 5 million signing, and they can really do with somebody else other than Dessers being a decent kind of focal point for this team. Because imagine if Dessers went injured now, the state of this Rangers team would be quite something. And speaking of people going off injured, Proper went off injured, their centre-half, who, as I've said, I don't think he looks particularly great, but they're just actually struggling for bodies at this point in time.
They brought Ben Davies on for him. I think he's an improvement on that.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's the Rangers squad itself is still looking quite, for a club of their size, obviously it's still like the second best squad in the league, but for a club of their size, it's still, you're looking at it going, how is it still this bad? And we're in mid-August.
You can talk about that. They weren't that impressive at all throughout the game. They probably did deserve to win the game, but they didn't play particularly well. I wouldn't say there are far too many names in that team that, as you say, are just not up to it. I did think St Johnstone were pretty decent again, though. I think we've been kind of going into fatigue on them in terms of the recruitment. They obviously didn't have a good League Cup group stage campaign either. They started the league season mixed bag. Obviously a really good win over Kelly. I think there are still a lot of players in there who are not really that good, and I think we might see that. But I think their strike partnership, those front two, if they can keep that together, that's a really, really good partnership. I think there's been a lot of focus on Sidibe with the goals, and with he's obviously got an agent who wants to get his name out there. Whereas, but Kim Pioka alongside him, I think is a good player as well. I think we've seen little bits of him since he came in. Relatively young, he's 24. He's definitely got age on his side from that point of view. I think he could be good, and I think if they can keep those two, they've got a decent chance, which I wouldn't have said. And Josh Ray took a bit of stick for his League Cup performances. He creates a lot of saves for himself, by like parrying things and not catching things properly and all of that, but he does then also tend to make them, or he did in this game. The one thing I would say is Dre Wright's defensive line for that winning the second sealing goal is absolutely terrible. So still things to work on, but I think they can probably mainly take positives out of the game, even if they got beat.
Right, let's go to our final game, and this is the one where it was hard to find a kind of strong either winner or loser. I suppose one you could say is, again, going back to goalkeeping issues. So I've sang the praises of Ellery Balcom in terms of his performances for St Mirren in those 2 European matches where he made a number of good saves, but he was certainly a loser for this game because it does really look like he's very good at shot stopping, excellent shot stopper. Can he do anything else? I'm not entirely sure, because he's looked poor at judging the ball when it's going along the ground, when he needs to come out from his line to go and collect it. And his kickings looked a bit dodgy. And there was even a point in this game as well where he was very lucky that one of his kickouts actually kind of squeezed through a gap of a couple of Dundee United players and launched a St Mirren counter, but it easily could have been United receiving the ball high up the park and attacking his goal. And he was poor against Aberdeen in terms of coming for a cross that he didn't get anywhere near, and he does it again for the only goal in this game scored by Ross Graham. So St Mirren seem to have signed themselves a goalie who will produce, well, I was going to say will produce some spectacular moments. No, actually, he's going to produce all spectacular moments, but they're either going to be great saves or they're going to be momentous fuck-ups that the rest of us can laugh at.
It's good for everyone apart from St Mirren fans, I think. So
Yes.
We'll go with it. Yeah, I think it sounded to me like this wasn't necessarily a particularly brilliant game. This is the one I think, obviously, with it being the last of the games, apart from the one I was kind of the one on the Sunday that I had least interest in, if you know what I mean. No particular slight on the teams, but one of them was on the telly and the other one was my team.
Yeah,
That's probably gone under the radar a wee bit. But for United, like getting into the that stage of the cup, and then they've got Motherwell, I think, in the quarter final, an opportunity to get to Hampden is kind of what you're looking for as a newly promoted team. Like, and they look fine. Like they look, as I've said, kind of all along. I think they're just all right. And I think what we are seeing is a bit of squad rotation in a team that kind of looks like they will be a Premiership team, and they've already picked up, I would say, a decent, not brilliant start to the season, and then to beat St Mirren in a cup tie again. Yes, St Mirren were playing on Thursday night. They don't have the next Thursday night to look forward to, but they do have, like, they are going to be a wee bit tired already. But
I think the most promising thing for United for this one is the keeping a clean sheet against Premiership opposition, because they couldn't manage to hold on last weekend, and that does look like the area of their side that's maybe going to have the biggest question marks about it, because going forward they do look like they've managed to recruit some handy players. Babinski didn't have the best of matches in this one, but he's kind of shown his quality already, and Trapanovsky has just made a tremendous start to the season. But not only him, Will Ferry, I thought the opening game of the campaign against Dundee, I thought he was there was other players getting more headlines, but I thought he was the standout for them. Play looked excellent, and he was good again in this one. The cross for the goal as well. Jort van der Sande, not sure how many goals he's going to score this season, but he's certainly somebody that kind of works hard for the front and opens up those avenues for the other players to score. And Louis Moult, it'd be interesting to see, like, over the next couple of months whether Moult can. It's still got enough in the tank to do the role that's going to be asked of him at United, which is to be that goal threat off the bench, or that goal threat to swap with Van der Sande. He obviously did it last year in the Championship. I thought I only saw really Moult playing a couple of times when he was at Motherwell, because he was injured for a lot of it. But in one of the occasions he did play was a game at Tynecastle, where I thought he was excellent. So he's had the injury issue since he was last in the Scottish top flight as a Motherwell player. But sorry, his first spell when he was sold for all that money. And he's clearly lost something, but if that wee cameo we saw in this game, where him getting that chance, kind of racing through, hitting a good shot, unlucky to see it come off the bar, if that's what he could give them most weeks, then they've certainly got enough going forward. It's at the back where the question marks are, but they did have a couple of new players in this one, in the fact that let's try this one, Adio Boyoga. Emmanuel Adeoboyega, who was playing in his second game. He played against County, looked a bit iffy in that one, but had a much stronger afternoon this time around. And Lucas Stevenson, who's come in from Liverpool, made a start on the right of the midfield four as they go with a 3-4-3, and he had a solid game as well. So they're maybe improving on that side.
I have to say, I had no idea until I was looking at the team literally for this podcast that Adeoboyega and Ubochioma were two different people. I just saw big long name, lots of vowels. Don't know how I'm going to pronounce that, and thought it was the same guy because I don't think they've been on the park together at any point yet. So apologies to both of you, but I'm sure we'll learn about you as the season goes on. It's very difficult in general with United because they've signed a lot of players that we have no reference point for at all because they've come from either Europe or from down south in like youth football and stuff. So very much a getting to know them type of squad, whereas we basically know almost all of St Mirren's. So it'll be good to watch them properly at some point.
St Mirren changed things up a little bit, as you would understand, after playing in Europe on Thursday. So they brought in Scott Tanser played on the left, and he had Jakoviti as the left-sided centre half, and it seems now that I know Jakoviti scored in midweek, but that's not generally his job. It seems to be that Richard Taylor and Jayden Brown at this point should probably be starting every week. Not so much Jakoviti that he's not doing a decent enough job, it's just that he's kind of more of a limited player. Taylor's very good at kind of moving out with the ball. Now, he can be a little bit lax when he does that and can put St Mirren into some dangerous positions, and Jakoviti is probably the more dependable defender out of the two of them. So it'll be interesting to see if Taylor, if he does get a run of it, of what happened last season where he was playing very well, but then there was just kind of too many mistakes and Robinson kind of lost a bit of faith in him by the end of the campaign. But with him at left-sided centre-back, able to take the ball out, and Tanser just playing so poorly at this moment in time, just so negatively, not taking any chances, seem to have lost a bit of confidence. Brown can't cross the ball, especially nowhere near like Tanser can cross the ball. But he is actually playing aggressively, and that gives St Mirren a bit of drive going up that side of the pitch that they're really lacking at this moment in time without them. And there's a few other guys that didn't play well who have kind of had decent starts to the season. Oisin Smith and Roland Iduwu have had the praises for previous performances. Neither of them played well in this one, and they really kind of struggled for any kind of consistent threat in this game other than Olasanya, who is now just kind of turned into, as Tony and I, along with Ewan, discussed on the Patreon we did of the European games last Friday, is just kind of turning into one of St Mirren's best players. And he maybe just needs to start most games now as opposed to continuing that impact sub role that he had through most of the last season. Right, Craig, there's actually just one more discourse. We didn't talk about Queen's Park at all. I meant to add in something for their game before we moved on. Just a very quick winner. Cammy Kerr, who last season kind of reinvented himself as a defensive midfielder at Inverness, having been a career right-back with Dundee. Got to Queen's Park now, and he was playing in centre-half in this one, and Queen's Park's man of the match. So there you go, Cammy Kerr. At one point, I thought he was kind of a really good prospect at right-back. It never really kicked on for him. He just kind of stagnated and was the same player for multiple years, and Dundee fans kind of got a bit, even though he's a kind of local boy and they love that side of him, I think they kind of eventually wore out his welcome at Dens Park, but turns out they maybe just use him wrongly. You should use him in every other position apart from that.
Yeah, well, I think, it maybe kind of found his level because I think a lot of his best at Dundee was when they were in the Championship as well, so he was all right sometimes in the Premiership, so it's maybe a little bit of both there.
Right, Craig, and that'll do us. We've covered every game. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks very much, and hope everyone enjoys their week.
Yes, and thank you to everybody for listening to the podcast. If you would like to hear more from us, the best way to do so is to join our Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. There is a lot of stuff going up on the Patreon this week. There is Duncan has done an interview with the director of The Home Game, which is a movie about football in Iceland. There is Craig Cairns. Craig has managed to, I'm not going into detail because it's up to him to tell you all, but Craig has managed to get himself some new employment. So he's at the matches, which he's been doing for Patreon, will be less frequent. He still hopes to be doing them every now and again, but they won't be every week as they have been to start the season. That's a It's a shame, but there's been some excellent bit of content there, and he will be releasing one on the Dundee United game from this week. And there will also be the podcast schedule from tomorrow. Andy Ewan talking about the transfer business. There's Tony and Gary talking about the weekend's fixtures. We've got loads planned. So if you want to hear all of that, then it's patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. That'll do us. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.